I never thought that a birthday cake would be the last thing I ever baked for my daughter. It sat untouched on the dining table, candles never lit, icing beginning to melt. Above it, a paper banner sagged with the weight of time and air, still clinging to hope. "Happy 70th," it said, as if those words had power. As if my daughter would walk through the door and say, "Sorry, Mom, I didn't forget." But the door stayed closed. My phone stayed silent. I had on my favorite dress, the navy one with the pearl buttons she always used to compliment. "You look like a queen in that one, Ma." That's what she used to say. That was before she found richer crowns to kneel to. The table had been set for 6, just in case. Her husband, the kids, maybe even his parents if they were feeling civil. I had made all their favorites: lemon chicken, macaroni pie, a chocolate cake. I'd practiced 3 times to get right. I wanted to get it right. I wanted to be enough. But she didn't show. Instead, around 8:13 p.m., a photo pinged onto my phone from someone I barely knew. One of those people who lurk and scroll and send things just in case you haven't seen. It was her, my daughter, in a sequined dress on the upper deck of a cruise ship, drink in hand, husband grinning beside her, his parents, their cousins, the whole clan I had fed, helped, loaned money to, all smiling into the sunset like a postcard from another life. And the caption? "Here with my beautiful family, cheers to new chapters." Not a word about me, not even a lie. I remember staring at the screen for a long time. I zoomed in, as if clarity would change the pain. I studied their faces, their joy, their ease. My daughter looked younger, lighter, like shedding me had given her new breath. And I was just here, surrounded by wilting flowers and balloons bought with a senior discount coupon. My hand went to my chest, not dramatic, just instinct. The silence in the room buzzed louder than any argument ever could. It wasn't just forgetting. It was deliberate. She didn't want to remember me, didn't want to pretend. I whispered her name. Once, softly, as if it might pull her back. It didn't. She used to say, "When we make it big, I'm taking you everywhere with me." I remember laughing, brushing it off, saying all I really wanted was a quiet porch and some peace. But she swore up and down. If we ever made it, she'd never forget who held her up, that she'd build a house next door that I'd never want for anything. "You're my rock, Mom." Funny how rocks are only useful when they're needed to build someone else's foundation. I stood there for a long time after the sun dipped below the windows. The cake had started to sink in the middle. I watched it collapse, a soft, sugary cave-in, and thought, there, that's what love without respect looks like. No calls, no text, no apology, just erasure. I didn't cry. Not then. Grief didn't have room. Not when humiliation took up every inch. I blew out the candles myself, one by one. No wish, just smoke. And that's when I knew. Love wasn't the glue I thought it was. Sometimes, it's the knife. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that photo. My daughter, wrapped in laughter. Her husband's arm draped over her shoulders like possession, not love. Champagne flutes raised mid-toast. The ocean sparkling behind them. Endless, detached, indifferent. Like her. I laid in bed, arms crossed over my chest like a body bracing for burial. The quiet was sharp, not peaceful, not soft, sharp, like a splinter lodged beneath the skin. And it throbbed, every minute dragged behind the next, heavy and loud. At 3:17 a.m., I gave up trying. I picked up my phone again, opened the picture, zoomed in, studied every face. His mother, his cousins, people who had sat at my table, taken seconds, laughed at my stories, and then never once asked how I was when I stopped coming to gatherings. I was just the woman who cooked, the one who gave rides, the woman who paid. And my daughter, she still used my credit card. My name was still listed as secondary contact on her boys' school forms. I still watched her kids whenever they wanted a weekend away. I paid for their dance lessons, for the new air conditioner, for the emergency dentist visit, when her husband chipped a tooth on a rib he swore was undercooked. I told myself it was love. When her father died, she was 16. He left us just enough to cover college if we budgeted right. And I did. I pinched every penny. Bought store-brand cereal. Wore my old coat with the missing button for 3 winters. Never let her feel how thin things really got. So when she married, I thought, maybe this is the start of her own family. A real one, a life where she'd stand on her own 2 feet. But 2 years in, they called. Just for a little while, Mom. We're saving up. He lost his job again, and our lease is ending. You've got that big house. I didn't even think about it. I handed over the keys. But the part no one ever asked about, the part no one ever saw, was me. I moved out, into a small 1-bedroom apartment near the grocery store. Temporary, I told myself. They're newlyweds. They need space. I'll be back soon. That was 5 years ago. They never offered rent, never paid utilities, never once asked if I needed anything. But they remodeled the kitchen, painted the nursery, changed the locks without telling me. Just for safety, she said. My name was still on the deed. But it hadn't felt like my house in years. Every favor they asked turned into another bill I covered. Dentist appointments, ballet lessons, pet insurance for a dog I didn't ask for, but somehow ended up walking when they went on trips. They called it helping out. I called it forgetting I ever existed outside of what I could give. And still, I told myself this was what family does. We sacrifice. We show up. We don't keep score. But the truth is, they were keeping score. They just weren't counting anything I did. And somewhere along the line, I stopped counting too. Because I didn't want to face the number. But now, with my birthday cake still sitting in my fridge untouched and their smiling cruise photo burned into my phone screen, I saw it clearly. They didn't move in with me, they moved me out. I sat at my old desk the next morning, the one they shoved into the hallway when they needed more storage space. It smelled like dust and lavender and something older. Like me. I hadn't opened that drawer in years. Funny how quickly desperation becomes clarity. I pulled out the manila folder I'd kept tucked behind expired coupons and old greeting cards. I didn't even know what I was looking for. Maybe I just needed proof that I wasn't crazy, that I hadn't imagined everything I'd given. I flipped through the papers slowly. A bank statement from 2019, overdraft from a PayPal transfer I never made. An old letter from the gas company thanking me for catching up on the previous balance. I didn't remember doing that, but it was my name. My account. Then I saw it. A power of attorney form. Dated and signed. Sloppy handwriting. Mine. I remembered now. They'd convinced me it was temporary. Just to help with sorting bills, Ma. You hate calling customer service. I flipped the page. Another signature. My daughter's husband. My stomach turned. I found the other one, too. The bank's shared access form. Authorized user, Michelle Carter. My daughter. Full control. I'd signed that one, too. The note in the margin was in her handwriting. For emergencies only. There were no emergencies. There were, however, automatic monthly transfers. Regular, as a heartbeat. $300 here, $500 there. Into an account I didn't recognize. Always on the first of the month. Always labeled household support. Except I hadn't seen a dime of that support. I sat back, my fingers shaking. Thousands. They hadn't been managing my finances. They'd been managing me. I should have felt rage, but what I felt was worse. Cold, thick shame. Not just that they did it, that I let them, that I wanted so badly to believe I mattered. I signed the papers that erased me. I stared at the folder a long time. I thought about the cruise photo, about the cake, about the years of swallowing maybe next month, and we're just figuring things out. And then I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I took a breath, a deep one, the kind that fills your chest with something other than regret. Then I whispered, out loud this time, no more. I hadn't been to the public library in months. They used to know me there. I ran the bake sale table every summer, taught a memoir class in the basement twice a week, writing through loss. There was even a mug with my name on it in the staff room. I was part of the walls once. But like everything else, I'd let that part of me slip away, unnoticed. Not today. I walked in just after 10, bag over my shoulder, cardigan buttoned, hair brushed back the way I used to wear it before doctor appointments. I didn't want to look lost. I wanted to look prepared. The girl at the front desk smiled. "Morning, Miss Carter," she said. I nodded. "Quiet today?" "Always is on Wednesdays," she said, then leaned in. "Back for book club?" I gave a small smile. "Not this time." I walked past the displays, past the magazines, and the little seasonal corner they always overdecorated, straight to the back row, where the public computer terminals sat like forgotten sentries. Most were empty. I picked the one near the window, sat down, logged in, and typed into the search bar, "Can you revoke power of attorney without notifying the other party?" The answer was clearer than I expected. Yes. As long as I was still mentally competent, and I was, I had every right to revoke, update, and restrict financial access to anything in my name. I didn't need her permission. I didn't even have to explain myself. Next, I typed, "How to change banking passwords securely." Then, "How to find a financial advisor for elder abuse recovery." Each click made something old inside me stir, like a floorboard settling after a long storm. I made a list, printed it, even stapled the corners, just like I used to when I worked for the city's housing board, back when people respected what I said because it came with a badge and a clipboard. Then I opened my bank's website, sat there, cursor blinking in the login field like it was daring me to blink first. I reset the password. Simple as that. No calls, no fights, no drama, just a new code. Mine. After that, I called the bank directly. I used the quiet study room, shut the door, and gave my name, account number, and the last 4 digits of a card I hadn't even seen in months. The woman on the line was polite, maybe a little too cheerful, but she confirmed what I feared. "Yes, ma'am. Your daughter Michelle is listed here as an authorized user. Would you like to remove her?" I swallowed. The air in the room felt thick. My fingers tapped the desk before I could speak. "Yes," I said. "Remove her. Effective immediately." "Done," she replied. Just like that. I hung up and stared at the wall. No one knew what I had just done. But I knew, and it felt like waking up. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was recovery. A slow, deliberate reclaiming of the life they thought I was too tired to protect. I walked out of the library, paper in hand, wind in my lungs, and I whispered, just once, like a prayer, "I'm not done yet." The lawyer's office was brighter than I expected. Not cold, not clinical, just simple. Real wood desk, a green plant in the corner. Books on the shelves that weren't just for show. Her name was Claire. Mid-30s, maybe. Hair in a neat twist. Glasses that made her look serious but not unkind. I half expected her to talk to me like I was already senile. They usually did, but she didn't. She offered me tea. Chamomile or black? I picked chamomile. It felt less confrontational. She sat across from me and listened. Really listened. I laid out the documents one by one. Bank statements, signed forms, the printed emails they thought I never read. Every page was trembling in my hand, but not from fear, from remembering. "I know it sounds like a mess," I said. Claire shook her head gently. "It's not a mess, it's theft." I blinked. The word was sharp. Too sharp. It made me flinch. "I'm sorry?" "You don't need to apologize," she said. "You've got everything we need to start protecting your assets. You're not imagining any of this. You've got signatures, dates, transactions that never should have happened under your name. And more importantly," she flipped the power of attorney form toward me and tapped her pen. "This is revocable." And it was broad, too broad. They used it to bleed you. Bleed me. God. I looked down at my hands. The same hands that had changed her diapers. held her after her first miscarriage, bought groceries while her husband, quote, figured out his business plan. I'd signed every form because I thought I was helping. I thought that's what love looked like. Claire leaned forward. We can lock this down. All of it. Your accounts, your home, your insurance, even your will. You'll be the only one with access, unless you decide otherwise. I nodded slowly. My throat felt dry. I want that. Good, she said. Because no one's going to advocate for your peace like you can. That's when the tears came. Not sobbing. Not loud. Just a few hot drops that slipped out before I could stop them. I covered my mouth with my hand and looked away. Take your time, Claire said softly. I hadn't cried like that in years, not even when my husband died. Back then, I didn't have time to fall apart. I had a teenager, and bills and a funeral to organize. But now, sitting in that chair with the sun warming my back, I let it out, all of it, quietly. When I finally looked up, Claire handed me a tissue and a copy of the new forms. You don't need anyone's permission to be free, she said. You just need a pen. I took it, signed my name, firm, full, no shaking. That was the first time I felt something shift inside me. Not just clarity, not just power, dignity, something they hadn't taken. Not completely. When I left her office, the sky was the same. Cars passed. People shouted into their phones. Nothing around me looked different. But I was. They didn't know it yet, but the rules had changed. This time, I wasn't asking. I was preparing. And I wasn't afraid of their disappointment anymore. Because I had finally remembered who I was before they taught me to forget. The bank smelled like paper and perfume and the slow decay of patience. I waited in line, holding my leather folder close to my chest like it might fly away if I loosened my grip. The woman at the counter looked barely old enough to rent a car. I didn't hold it against her. She greeted me with a smile, called me Miss Carter, and asked how she could help. I need to update some permissions, I said, and close some things. Her fingers froze above the keyboard. Are you the primary on the accounts? Yes, I said, louder than I meant to. I'm the only one who ever was. She led me to a small office with glass walls and fake ficus in the corner. The chair creaked when I sat down. I opened my folder, slid over the revocation papers from Claire, my updated ID, and a list of every account they had access to. I want their names removed. I want full control back. And I want to be notified for every transaction that hits my accounts, every single one. She blinked, but didn't argue. Maybe it was the way I said it. Maybe she'd heard this kind of thing before. Maybe she saw the quiet tremble in my left hand and understood it wasn't from weakness, but restraint. It took 43 minutes. I watched every keystroke like a hawk. One by one, she confirmed it all. The shared credit card? Closed. The household account I never used? Frozen. The overdraft line that mysteriously opened last year? Shut down. A new checking account in my name. Mine alone. At the end, she looked up. Would you like alerts for each transaction over a certain amount? I nodded. Every purchase, every login, every cent. She clicked something. Done. They were still on that cruise, still sipping champagne, still pretending I didn't exist. They had no idea the floor was about to give. I left the bank and stood on the sidewalk. The sun was sharp, and the wind picked at my cardigan. I didn't rush. I just stood there, feeling the weight of it all. The years of letting myself shrink so they could stretch. The birthday they skipped. The bills I paid. The silence I swallowed. But this was different. They'd come home in a few days, probably sunburnt, probably smug. They'd roll their bags into my hallway and expect dinner to be ready, laundry washed, the bills paid like magic. But the accounts wouldn't work. The credit card would be declined. The bills would bounce, and they'd have to sit in that mess, their mess, without me holding the mop. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like a burden. I felt like a woman who had remembered she owned the key to her own damn house. Let them come home to silence. Let them come home to consequence. And when they do, They'll find out I haven't just been sitting in the dark. I've been watching. The email came at 2:08 p.m. Subject line, urgent payment declined. I was watering my violets when I heard the chime. I almost ignored it, thought it was another ad or a useless newsletter, but something made me check. The sender was from a cruise line. I opened it. Dear Mrs. Carter, we attempted to process the final charges associated with your cabin reservation. The payment method on file has been declined. Please contact us immediately to resolve the balance for party ID number 4827. I stared at the screen. Party Idaho 4827. My daughter, her husband, his parents, their cousins. 6 people. 1 card. My card. Or what used to be mine. I didn't reply. I didn't panic. I just smiled. Not out of cruelty, but out of something cleaner. Justice. Closure. Then came the voicemails. The first one arrived 20 minutes later. Her voice cracked, tight and breathless. Mom, hey. We're having some kind of issue with the cruise card. I think it's a mix-up with the bank. Could you just give them a quick call? I'm sure it's nothing. I didn't answer. An hour later. Mom, they're saying we can't check out, that we can't disembark without settling the final balance. This is crazy. Just call them, please. Then a text. Mom, please. We can't get off the ship. I swear it's just a glitch. They're making us sit in the reception area like criminals. Like criminals. Another voicemail. I'm so embarrassed. They're treating us like, Mom, you don't understand. We have the kids with us. Just call the number. Fix this. You always fix this. I set my phone down. I didn't reply. I didn't even listen to the last message. I just walked outside, sat in the yard, and listened to the wind move through the roses. For once, the house was quiet. Not because I had kept the peace, but because I had earned it. The sun felt different, like it saw me again. Let them sit. Let them explain to the concierge why the woman they ignored, erased, discarded, why she no longer answered. Let them watch the staff whisper, side-eye, pity. I imagined them in the lobby, sweating, red-faced, pretending to be victims, while someone behind a desk printed receipts they couldn't pay. I imagined the moment her husband realized he had no backup plan, no more fallback, that the card was gone, the access revoked, the safety net cut clean. And I imagined her, my daughter, dialing me with that same soft urgency she used when she was young and needed gas money. When she used to say, just this once, Mom. I swear. But this time, the line stayed cold. This time, there was no answer. Because I had finally taught her what it felt like to stand in need and find only silence. That day I felt lighter than I felt in years. I watered my roses like I had nothing left to prove. Because I didn't. The petals were soft that morning, blooming, open, full of themselves, in a way I hadn't felt in years. I leaned in, inhaled the scent, clean, bright, unbothered, just like I was becoming. The voicemail icon blinked on my phone again. 6 new messages. I didn't check them. I slid the phone, face down on the porch table, and let the hum of insects and the rustle of wind drown out whatever apology or demand or lie waited inside them. My neighbor waved from across the fence. Haven't seen you in ages. I nodded. Just taking care of the things that actually bloom when you tend to them. She laughed. That soft, surprised kind of laugh people give when they know there's more behind the words, but they respect the boundary. She didn't ask questions. Just held up a basket. Tomatoes. We had too many. Want some? Only if you take some of these, I said, cutting a handful of roses and offering them over the fence. She smiled, like I'd given her gold. Kindness, when it costs nothing, feels like a miracle. Kindness, when it costs everything, becomes something else. I stood in my garden, long after she left. I pruned. I clipped. I pulled weeds that had crept into the corners. It reminded me of how they crept in, Michelle and her husband. Just for a little while, Mom. And like any weed, they flourished in neglect. But not anymore. I'd spent so long tending everyone else's needs that I forgot what it felt like to care for something that didn't take and take and take. These flowers? They never asked for a credit card. They never judged my worth by how much I could give. They just grew. I sat down on the porch steps, a glass of water sweating in my hand. The house behind me was still. Not empty, just finally mine. Every room I walked through now had space for my thoughts, not their mess. No shouting, no slamming doors, no manipulation masked as stress. Just hardwood, soft light, and quiet. Real quiet. Not the kind I used to live in. The bitter, biting kind. This was something else. Peace. They were still out there, flailing, fumbling, trying to fix a mess they made without the one person who always cleaned up after them. Let them. I didn't wish them harm. I wasn't cruel. But I wasn't a crutch anymore either. And when the sun slipped lower and painted the porch in gold, I smiled at the stillness. Because this was the beginning of something new. Not revenge. Not a grand act of justice. Just the simple, radical act of choosing me over obligation. They could yell. They could spin. But I was done. This garden, this porch, this quiet, it belonged to someone who had finally remembered how to bloom. The phone rang at 3:14 p.m. a Florida number. I almost didn't answer. I don't like unknowns. But something in me, some quiet readiness, picked up. "This is Evelyn Carter," I said, calm as a lake. A young man's voice greeted me, far too polite. "Hi, ma'am. I'm calling from the Harmony Sunliner billing office. Your contact information is listed on file for a cabin associated with Party Idaho 4827. Is that correct?" I already knew what this was. I didn't flinch. "That's correct," I said. He cleared his throat. "We've attempted to process the charges for their onboard expenses, but the card declined. The guests indicated you may be the payer of record. Would you be willing to authorize an alternative form of payment to settle the balance?" The way he asked, not demanding, just expectant. As if, of course, the older woman would rush in and smooth it all over. As if I hadn't already spent the last decade patching holes they poked through their own lives. I stood up and walked to the kitchen window, looked out at the garden I had just weeded that morning. "No," I said clearly, "I'm not responsible for those charges. Please direct billing to the adults who made the trip." Silence on the line. He tried again. "Ma'am, the current balance." "I don't care what the balance is," I said, still quiet. "They're adults. If they ordered champagne and lobster and custom photo packages, that's between them and your billing system, not me." "I understand, ma'am." "But they claimed." "I don't care what they claimed." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't have to. I just let the truth speak for itself. He hesitated. "So, to confirm, you will not be providing payment for the balance?" "I think I just did." Another pause. Then, like a curtain being drawn back, his voice shifted. "Understood. We'll note the file. Thank you for your time." He hung up. And I stood there, holding the cordless phone in one hand, my other resting against the counter like a woman who had just dropped a stone she'd been gripping for far too long. It wasn't about the money. It never really was. It was about the assumption that I'd always clean up behind them, that I'd always answer. That I was the backup plan, the guarantor, the unpaid emotional laborer, who'd smile through being used, because that's just what moms do. But not anymore. Not after everything. They had a party of 6, and not one of them thought to carry their own weight. Let them handle it. Let the ship hold them a little longer, while the debt circled like sharks in the water. Let them learn. Not through punishment, but through absence. My absence. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing. The next day, I returned into the Claire office. She slid the will across the desk, like she was handing me the last brick in a wall I'd spent my whole life patching from the wrong side. "It's all here," she said. "Every revision. Every clause. You're in full control." I skimmed the pages again, not because I didn't trust her. I did, but because I needed to feel it, my name on every line. My decisions in ink. My future, finally untangled from theirs. She tapped her pen gently. "You sure about the scholarship fund?" I nodded. Let someone's daughter go to college without debt. Let someone's mother sleep, knowing her child won't be buried in loans. She smiled. And the cousin? Every Christmas, I said. Even after the stroke, she sent a handmade card. Never asked for anything. Just said she was thinking of me. Claire nodded and made the final notes. The money would go where it meant something. Not where it was expected. Not where it would be wasted on brunch and rented praise. My daughter wasn't even in the contingency. She had already received her inheritance. Years of sacrifice, bills paid, hands held through every one of her collapses. And now? Now, she got the silence she earned. I've also added language in case she contests, Claire said. Standard stuff. Intent. Mental competency. Revocation authority. I reached into my bag, pulled out a flash drive. And this, I said. Claire raised an eyebrow. It's a video. I made it last night. What kind of video? A message, I said. But not for her. For the court. For the truth. She took the drive and turned it over in her fingers. You want me to include it in the formal record? Yes, I said, and my voice didn't tremble this time. I'd filmed it sitting at my kitchen table. No makeup, no script, just me, telling the story out loud, the whole damn thing. The years, the theft, the erasure. I wanted them to see the woman she called a leech, to see the strength behind the silence. I ended the video with one sentence. You only miss me now that I said no. Claire slipped the flash drive into a labeled envelope and slid it into her filing drawer. Is there anything else you want? She asked. I leaned back. The air in her office was crisp, filtered, clean. It reminded me of how breathing used to feel before I filled my lungs with other people's weight. No, I said. That's everything. We stood, shook hands. Congratulations, she said softly. Most people never get this far. I didn't think I would, I admitted. I thought I'd just fade out, be the old woman in the corner no one wanted to hear from. But you didn't, she said. You spoke. I left her office and stepped out into the sun, file folder under my arm. Cars passed. People hurried. Life went on. But for me, everything had changed. I hadn't just written a new will. I had written the final chapter of their access to me. The phone rang at 12:43 a.m. I was sitting at the dining room table, a cup of chamomile cooling beside me, the room lit only by the stove light behind me. I wasn't tired. Not in the body, but somewhere deep in the bones I'd grown used to this kind of quiet. I looked at the screen. Michelle. I let it ring once, twice. Then I answered. Her voice came through like a storm. Mom, we're stuck. We can't leave. No hello. No apology. No, how are you? That last part cracked. Not from sadness, from fear. They'd spent everything. Banked on a lie. Built a fantasy on a foundation that wasn't theirs. And now the tide had pulled back. And all that was left was a woman trying to sound helpless again. I looked at the photo, still sitting on the table beside me. The one from my birthday. Empty chairs. A cake untouched. Balloons withering mid-air under a banner that said, Happy 70th. Like a joke I never laughed at. Please, she whispered again. Mom, please. I let the silence stretch. Let it sit between us, like all the meals she skipped, all the favors she never returned. Let her sit in it. Then I spoke. I'm sorry to hear that. And I hung up. No rage, no tears, just the truth, delivered in the same voice I used when she was a little girl and tried to lie about sneaking cookies before dinner. Because that's all this was now. A child playing adult, trying to clean up glass with her bare hands after throwing the stone herself. I put the phone down, took a sip of my cold tea, didn't flinch. I knew she'd call back. I knew she'd try to spin it. But the truth is, when someone shows you what you are to them, not just once, but over and over, the worst thing you can do is keep asking for a different answer. She had spoken loud and clear. And now? So had I. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to explain myself or justify the silence. She wasn't just locked out of the cruise. She was locked out of me. They came back the next afternoon. I didn't need to check flight trackers. Didn't need to guess. Word travels faster in small towns than grief ever does. And this time, it came through a friend's daughter who worked cruise staff. They had to clean the boat, she whispered, half shocked. Laundry detail, scrubbing toilets, dish duty. You'd think they were on probation. I thanked her with a nod, but said nothing. My hands were steady as I folded the dish towel on my lap. I wasn't surprised. Debt collects interest, especially when it's built on entitlement. Later that evening, the door slammed open. I didn't jump. I just looked up. There she was, my daughter. Her face red, sunburned around the edges, hair tangled like she hadn't bothered to brush it, eyes glassy and wet. Not from sorrow, from humiliation, from being seen without the shield of control. Her husband stood behind her, jaw tight, silent for once. "How could you let that happen to us?" she shouted. I didn't respond. She stomped forward. "We were treated like criminals, like freeloaders. We had to mop floors, Mom. Do you even understand what that feels like?" I blinked, slow and calm. Then I stood. We were in the same living room where I used to rock her to sleep, where she once cried over her first breakup, head buried in my lap, begging me to tell her she'd be okay. Now she stood there like a stranger, screaming in my home. A house she hadn't paid for, hadn't maintained, hadn't respected in years. "You had no problem letting me sit alone on my birthday," I said, my voice low, measured, "while you drank champagne with strangers." She froze. I stepped closer. Not a call. Not a text. Not even a lie to make it better. Just a picture. A caption. "Here with my beautiful family." As if I never existed. Her bottom lip trembled, just barely. I didn't flinch. "So now we're even," I said. "You're being cruel," she whispered. I looked her straight in the eye. "No, I'm being honest, for once." Her husband stepped forward like he might say something, might try to defend her, but when our eyes met, he stopped. Maybe for the first time, he realized I wasn't the help. I was the homeowner. She looked around like the walls might back her up, but the room didn't bend for her anymore. "I needed you," she said, softer this time. I shook my head. "No, you needed what I gave. You never once looked at me like someone who deserved to have needs of her own." She turned away, voice cracking. "I just thought you'd always be there." "And I was," I said, "until you made it clear I wasn't welcome anymore." She opened her mouth again, but I held up my hand. "No more. Not today. Go home." And then, without another word, I turned and walked into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, listened to the front door close, and for the first time in her life, she left without getting what she came for. I drove to their house the next day, not out of spite, out of necessity. They thought the storm had passed. They didn't realize it had only just arrived. And this time, it had my name on it. The porch looked the same as always. Chipped paint. An empty planter that used to be full when I bought it. A live, laugh, love sign crooked in the window. I had paid for that too. She stepped outside before I even knocked. Arms crossed, face tight. Like a child waiting for punishment she swore she didn't deserve. "You humiliated us on that cruise," she said before I could speak. "And now this?" She shoved a stack of papers into my hands. Final notice. Delinquent mortgage. Foreclosure proceedings beginning in 60 days. I didn't blink, just flipped through the pages. Every month, I had paid in silence. 4 years of checks, online transfers, emergency funds that somehow became expected. "I told you," she snapped. "He was between jobs. We were building something. And I was the cement," I said quietly. "Unpaid, unthanked, invisible." "You could have just told us you were cutting back," she said, voice rising. "Not let the bank take our house." "No," I corrected. "I didn't let the bank take your house. You did." She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her time. I pulled a second folder from my bag, neatly labeled. Every mortgage statement, every payment I'd made, from my own account, under my own name. I handed it to her. "You wanted independence. You said you were grown. That I needed to trust you more. So I did." She flipped through the papers, eyes moving faster, face draining of color. Her husband came to the door but didn't say a word, just stood there. A man who finally realized what it meant to stand in front of consequences with no shield left to blame. "I didn't know," she whispered. You were still paying?" "Until last month," I said. "When I stopped." "Why now?" I met her eyes. "Because I'm tired," I said, "of paying for people who don't think I'm worth a seat at their table, who leave me behind and expect me to keep the lights on." Her hands shook. The folder dropped to the floor. "You can't just walk away," she said. "I already did," I said. "You just didn't notice." I stepped off the porch, walked back to my car. She didn't follow. As I opened the door, I turned back one last time. "Let's see," I said, "how far that beautiful family of yours carries you now." She didn't answer. She just stood there, barefoot on the wood I paid for, surrounded by a house built on my sacrifices, a house I no longer held up. And for the first time in her life, she looked small. Not because I made her feel that way, because she finally realized I wasn't beneath her anymore. I was above, out of reach. 3 days later, the sign went up. Bold. Red. Foreclosure. Notice. They tried to rip it down, but signs like that don't disappear just because you're embarrassed. They stay. Neighbors noticed. Of course they did. You can't hide desperation behind drawn curtains. Not when the lawn's gone to seed and the driveway's empty because the car got repossessed last winter. Another thing they never told me. I didn't go back. I didn't need to. The updates came to me. Through church friends, through neighbors, through whispered conversations at the grocery store I'd once paid for. "Did you hear? They're living now with his friend, just until they figure things out. Apparently his parents won't help with the house, called it her problem." I didn't laugh, but I didn't cry either. My phone lit up with messages, one after another, each one a mix of plea and poison. "You made your point. Are you happy now? We're your family. We needed you. Just this once. Please, we'll pay you back." They still didn't get it. This wasn't about money. It was about silence. Mine. And how they mistook it for weakness when it was mercy. For years, I said nothing, while they used my kindness like a ladder, while they handed out smiles bought with my credit, while they left me to scrub the memories of a life that only mattered when it served theirs. But now I didn't respond, and that was louder than anything I could have said, because they had always relied on my silence. It was the thing they counted on the most, the thing that made them bold enough to take. Again, and again, and again. But this time, my silence wasn't permission. It was closure. I stood at my kitchen window and looked out at the garden. My tomatoes were coming in thick this year, roses taller than I remembered. The sun felt like a kind of blessing. Not warm, but earned.